but that 88 is pulling away.
Earnhardt, Johnson, Menard, Blaney, third-generation star Dale Earnhardt Jr. brings him to the flag. Checkered flag waving. It's over. It's Earnhardt. Earnhardt trying to cover all spots.
Good job, Junebug.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. Checkered flag at Talladega.
Why is this one so much fun? Because your grin told so many stories on your cool-down lap.
It's just real emotional. I haven't won here in a long time. It was my daddy's birthday a couple days ago. Just real emotional, man.
My nerd world.
And welcome to it. I'm your host, John Justice, for this week's Dale Earnhardt Jr. Race Preview Podcast for Sonoma. This is arguably my least favorite set of weeks in NASCAR. And it makes it even worse when we're coming off a race like we had in Michigan when expectations were so high. And speaking of expectations, it's difficult going into a race like Sonoma because it's arguably Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s least favorite track. And it's even more difficult when he's fast. Now, I know that may not make sense, but I'll explain here in just a moment as a fan. We'll talk a little bit about Michigan. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I'll tell you why these couple of weeks are my least favorite in NASCAR. A little bit of merchandise news. We do have some paint scheme news to share with you, and then we're going to get right into Sonoma and the anticipation that is building for Sunday's race after an off weekend. So, first off, why do I not like these weeks? First off, I hate off weekends in NASCAR. And you know what? We're spoiled, right? I mean, we really are as NASCAR fans. We have the longest season of any professional sports teams. And, well, sports teams, we have the longest season of any professional sports. There, leave it at that. And so, you know, when you follow it, you know, every single weekend, like I do and like you do, when we have an off week, it kind of throws everything off. And it makes it even worse when you come off a weekend like we had in Michigan. And it makes it even worse when we're heading back to the first race after an off weekend and it's a road course. Road courses are not my favorite races to watch. And I don't think non-NASCAR fans understand that. You know, non-NASCAR fans think of, well, you know, road courses are the best because you're going left and right and there's more action involved. And to me, it's simply because most non-NASCAR fans don't understand why we NASCAR fans love NASCAR. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy watching the road course races, but I watch NASCAR because of the intricacies of it, because of all the variables involved. I would tend to argue that road courses are kind of like restrictor plate races. Now, I like restrictor plate races more, but when it comes to a road course, you know, there are things you can do for the car to make it better, but they really are a bit of a gamble. And you usually have a handful of guys that rise to the top in these road course races. I mean, and then you end up with these ringers that we have fewer ringers than we have in years past. And then on top of it, when you're a Dale Earnhardt Jr. fan, when you're heading to a road course race, you kind of go, because, you know, Dale Jr., historically speaking, doesn't do spectacular at road courses. And so heading into Sonoma, I'm kind of like, I'm glad NASCAR's back. I'm certainly going to be watching the race as soon as I get done with some work stuff I have to be doing. And neither here nor there, but I have an event I have to go to, so I'm going to be a little bit late into watching the race. But usually I head into this weekend going, all right, let's get through. I'm glad NASCAR's back. It's Sonoma. Let's get through it so we can get on to Daytona, which is, you know, for the 4th of July weekend. And usually that's the case, except for this weekend, expectations are high, which makes it even more difficult. I'll explain that here in just a moment. So before we get into the race preview portion of this, just briefly let's talk about Michigan. Michigan is so tough because as a fan, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but as a fan, it's tough when you go to Michigan because Michigan historically has been really kind to Dale Earnhardt Jr. He was able to pick up that fuel mileage win back in 2008 when he first joined Hendrick Motorsports, and everybody thought that it was going to be the big turnaround, right? And then, of course, we had the epic win back in 2012 on Father's Day in the Black Mountain Dew Dark Knight Rises car that ended the drought. And historically speaking, he's fast there. He's obviously won there in Sprint Cup, but he's also won there in the then Busch Series as well. So when you head to Michigan, your expectations as a Dale Earnhardt Jr. fan are high. And maybe that's unfair. Maybe we put, and I think just for me personally, I think maybe I personally put too much on that particular race because of those historic moments that have taken place. And so you get even more disappointed when we end up having a weekend like we had 2 weekends ago. And neither here nor there about starting in the back. The car was faster than what it was. If you listen to the Dirty Mo radio Dale Jr. download, or if you listen to TJ Mazur's, his Spotters Door Bumper Clear, you heard him talk about this and argue whether or not starting towards the back was the reason why he got caught up in that mess with A.J. Allmendinger that was started by Chris Buescher. Mike Davis made a comment on the Dirty Mo radio Dale Jr. download that, you're going to have to pass cars eventually during that race, and so you're going to be in that position regardless. But it's been a rough year so far, and we don't have a win yet, and we need to get a win. I'm not necessarily worried about getting into the chase. I think Dale Jr. will make it into the chase based on points alone, but that's not going to be good enough where we're going to go for a championship, and he has to run better. They need to get this first win out of the way, and you go into a race like Michigan, and you think it's going to happen, and then it doesn't, and it's disappointing. And then you're carrying that into an off week. I mean, I think I predicted Dale Jr. for the win during the last podcast. And everything apart from qualifying was certainly leaning that way, and it just didn't shake out. And so instead of, having 2 weeks to sit back and, anticipate the next race because we had a good run, it's 2 weeks having to head to Sonoma, coming off of a race where Dale Jr. wrecked again. So I kind of just put NASCAR out of my mind over the course of the past 2 weeks. Kept an eye on Jr. He went on vacation. He and Amy went on vacation and traveled, and he tweeted a bit about that. It was pretty clear he needed the time off, but based off of his tweets, he also wanted to desperately get back to the track. So I'm excited about Sonoma. I'll tell you why here in just a moment. If you've been paying attention at all, you know why I'm excited for the first time, and I can't wait to watch the race tomorrow. Let's talk a little bit of merchandise before we get there, though. Not a whole lot of items at either DaleJr.com or on NASCAR.com. If you go to the newest arrivals, there's a couple of oddball items in here. There's a new a 1/64 scale hauler diecast, part of Dale Jr.'s True Timber Camo collection. There's a couple of autographed items in here back from that win that I was just talking about in 2008, an autographed Michigan photograph and trophy photograph, which is kind of random items. And then there's a NASCAR bear with a Dale Jr. t-shirt on it. So in terms of new items, there's not a whole lot to really go and choose from. T-shirts as well. It's the middle of the season. You're not going to see a lot of new items. I think the next time we'll probably see any new merchandise will be more than likely once we get into the chase and they start releasing that chase merchandise, or we end up getting some special paint schemes. Then we end up getting some new merchandise. Speaking of paint schemes, on June 13th, Axalta Coating Systems celebrated its second consecutive year with General Motors a Supplier of the Year award. During the celebration, representatives from Axalta and the University of Michigan unveiled a joint paint scheme that Dale Jr. is going to run August 28th when we return to Michigan. It's based off of the Michigan colors of yellow and blue for the University of Michigan. It is a really, really nice-looking car. I don't know how much Dale Jr. had a hand in designing this car. We've talked about this at length before. The Dale Jr., likes to have cars that look a certain way. And when you've got a paint scheme and you're going off of the University of Michigan and their colors and what they already have, it's pretty easy to design a paint scheme around that. But it's not busy. It just has the primary colors of the Michigan yellow and blue, or gold, as I think my producer for my other radio show had said. Really good-looking car, though. No merchandise available for this particular paint scheme yet, but we still are about 2 months away from this car hitting the track, so I would expect that sometime between now and then, and probably closer to Michigan, there should be some merchandise available. And the good thing is, with the unveiling of this particular paint scheme this early on, more than likely it will mean that we'll actually be able to get the merchandise prior to the race. As I've mentioned before, if you're like me, I like to have the gear that Dale Jr. and the paint scheme gear that Dale Jr. is driving that weekend. As a matter of fact, I'm actually in my Exalta hat and Exalta t-shirt currently because I was so psyched up for qualifying, which we'll get to here in just a moment. So in terms of merchandise and paint scheme news, that's about it. Not a whole lot to report, so let's not waste any time, and let's get right to Dale Jr. and the race preview for this weekend.
My Nerd World.
So watching qualifying from kind of afar, I had a lot of things to do on Friday. Ended up going to the movies to see Independence Day Resurgence. It was just okay, but this is not one of my movie podcasts. This is Dale Jr. So keeping an eye on practice, and Dale Jr., I'm looking at the speed chart, is running some wicked fast lap times. Now, as I've stated, you can't normally pay attention to the top speeds on the speed chart. We've talked about this many times. You got to look at the lap averages. Sonoma's a little bit different. Sonoma, you can take a look at the speed chart for those fast laps. If you've got a car that's up there in the top 10, you know you've got a good car, and those fast laps matter. It's a lot different than when you're looking at an oval racetrack based off of a lot of different circumstances, but when you're taking a look at lap times and you see him high up on the speed chart, that makes a difference, especially as it relates to qualifying. So in first practice, he ended up fourth fastest on the board, and even Dale Jr. himself ended up tweeting out that he had a really fast race car. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and bring up his tweets here really quick, because I want to talk a little bit about this and Dale Jr.'s general attitude. And again, why I'm a fan of his. Okay, so let's go here right now. So these are the tweets as it relates to first practice and second practice, and then I'll comment a bit on this. Okay, so everybody was posting this video footage of Dale Jr. taking one of the early corners of Sonoma and how high his Exalta 88 was getting off the ground. If you're on Twitter, if you do a Dale Jr. search, you'll see the video file, the short video file of him taking this corner. Well, Dale Jr. retweeted it, and he said, "Never went through that corner the same twice today. Good fun, though." Then he tweeted this after the first practice was over on Friday. He said, "Incredible race car that Greg Ives and the Exalta gang unloaded today. I'm framing this damn timing sheet." And you look at the timing sheet, and Dale Jr. has the fastest, is the fastest in lap averages. Now, again, this is a track that arguably is Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s least favorite track. However, I do want to remind everybody, I want to remind you that Dale Jr. is no stranger to the road courses. And I chronicled this, and chronicled's kind of a strong word. I talked about this last year, probably as it relates to this race. But Dale Jr. had that horrible accident years ago. It was back in 2003, 2004, where he was running the road course in the Corvette, and it caught fire and ended up burning him, and he had to get a graft done on his neck. If you see his neck, he's got a little square where you had the graft done. I said all along that had a huge impact on him. And as I said last year, I used to race BMX bikes, pedal bikes. And when I was just about at my peak, I think at 13 or 14, I ended up breaking my wrist. And that affected me as a rider. I was never as good as I was after that. I think I finally, it was this moment where subconsciously I felt vulnerable. And I think ever since that time, I just subconsciously pulled back, and I was never as fast as I was after that happened. I think the same thing happened to Dale Jr. as it relates to road courses. He's no stranger to road courses. He knows how to run them. And as a matter of fact, he likes Watkins Glen, and mostly because Watkins Glen is a lot like the way you set up your car for Pocono, and he does good at Pocono. So that was his first tweet. Then Casey Kane tweeted to Junior and said, hey, Dale Jr., what about this one too? And it was another speed chart that showed him fast again. And Dale Jr. replied,